I've just received a call from Secretary Clinton. She congratulated us, it's about us, on our victory. And I congratulated her and her family on a very, very hard-fought campaign. I mean, she fought very hard.
One of the first things Trump talked about in his victory speech was rebuilding the national infrastructure.
We are going to fix our inner cities and rebuild our highways, bridges, tunnels, airports, schools, hospitals. We're going to rebuild our infrastructure, which will become, by the way, second to none. And we will put millions of our people to work as we rebuild it.
Trump promised to spend heavily on programs that will rebuild the country's infrastructure and create millions of jobs. We will use the ISLM model to illustrate what would happen to the American economy with this increase in government expenditure. We will start with the Keynesian cross, which shows the planned expenditure and the real output. Then we move to the IS curve, which shows the negative relationship between output and interest rates, and the LM curve. And if we put them together, we see the ISLM model in equilibrium. And finally, from here we move to the aggregate demand, aggregate supply model. So, an increase in government expenditure would move the IS curve to the right. And as a result of the IS curve shifting to the right, will shift the aggregate demand curve to the right. Although this government spending might look great to boost aggregate demand and stimulate the economy in the short run, there are still some disadvantages to this policy. The first one is the crowding out effect. Well, such a big formula. Okay, this only means that if we increase government spending, the aggregate demand will decrease because investment and consumption will decrease due to people's expectations. The second argument against Trump's plan of government expenditure is debt. Economists fear that such a huge investment would increase government's borrowings and therefore the country's debt will increase. Then, in order to repay the debt, higher taxes will be needed in the future. However, Trump has maintained that economic growth would more than compensate and not need more taxes to repay for the infrastructure spending. We will have to wait and see if this is true.
Even though the initial shock with his victory produced panic on global markets with a tendency to sell off at the beginning, Wall Street reacted positively, having near record high following the election. Despite this, experts have warned that the US and global economy face a very uncertain future. Some economists argued that due to the rapid selling of securities such as stock, bonds and commodities in the market, it would imply a sharp decline in unemployment and GDP, followed by a long period of stagnant growth, producing an L-shaped curve as we can see on the graph. Other economists had a constructive view, believing that the V-shaped movement in the market, due to positive tax changes and looser regulation environment, the market would initially go down and then up. Trump has requested fiscal stimulus measures to upgrade the US. He proposed a Keynesian-style spending to reset investors' expectations and arouse animal spirits. US stocks recovered due to the rise of the financial, healthcare and industrial stocks since investors bet on infrastructure spending. Spending infrastructure implies an inject dose of spending that could create jobs and break a trend of economic stagnation. Trump has proposed cutting taxes on corporations and the rich. In the past, that has been good for the stock market. While new regulations are often analyzed to estimate whether their benefits will outweigh costs, the scope and research of regulation has grown over the last several decades. A policy of removing two regulations for every new one would provide incentives to evaluate the cost and effectiveness of those accumulated regulations. Trump's statement doesn't provide details on how this new policy would work, but this team could look to experiences in other countries for insights. The Netherlands, Canada, Australia, and the United Kingdom have all adopted similar requirements to offset the cost of new regulations by removing or modifying existing rules. Some examples of regulations are: ask all department heads to submit a list of every wasteful and unnecessary regulation and eliminate them. reform the entire regulatory code to ensure that we keep jobs and wealth in America. We will no longer regulate our companies and our jobs out of existence. Cancel immediately all illegal and executive orders, and eliminate our most intrusive regulations like the waters of the US.
At first, Donald Trump was extremely aggressive with the illegal immigrants issue. He stated very polemic solutions to this matter, which created a division in the country. A big amount of manifestations were held during the campaign to show their love or hate to the candidate. In his campaign, he showed 4 main points to make America great again. First one, creating a wall between Mexico and the US, which Mexico will pay as the only thing that this country has brought to the US was crime and poverty, which supposed a big expenditure to the Americans. The second one, reinforcing all immigrants' law, deporting criminals to their own countries and increasing the fees of the visa. He wants to eliminate birthright citizens and oppose the DREAM Act that promotes illegal immigrants. And finally, change the detention centers as they will qualify as cozy. During the campaign, the division of Americans created an atmosphere of violence where Democrats and Republicans wanted to spread the right way to vote. In the first 100 days, the immigrant plan has been one of the main issues in which Trump wants to solve first. He has settled some numbers to enforce the immigrants' law. Illegal immigrants that want to re-enter the country will have 2 years prison penalty. Immigrants with illegal conviction that want to re-enter the country will have 5-year prison penalty. Removing the more than 2 million criminal illegal immigrants from the country and cancel visas to foreign countries that won't take them back. The immigrant law has been a big issue for Donald Trump. However, almost all these laws are held in every country in the world. Immigrants' law has been an issue for all developed countries, which have implemented them in their own country. The problem is how Donald Trump has stated this issue, created violence and hate.
The electoral program proposed by Donald Trump was focused on reforming the country internally. He is trying to remodel the US economy on the country itself, establishing a protectionist economy. What's the big deal? The USA is one of the top 3 countries of the worldwide economy. If the United States starts focusing on itself and cut the relation with other countries, these countries are going to start falling one by one. Not only this, but as it is a hand-to-hand relation, the economy of the USA will also be very damaged. Regarding foreign policy, let's take an example of a few days ago. Many newspapers have published that Donald Trump has been calling the Taiwan president. As you may know, USA makes commercial business with China. Since its history, Taiwan and China have broken relations. The approach Donald Trump is having toward Taiwan is damaging US foreign affairs with China. In the case of them, they are willing to cut USA-China relations if both countries ever approach again. This is not the only example. He has approached Kazakhstan and Pakistan too. He is planning to regain relations with Cuba and Russia in the future too. Regarding commercial relations, USA's most significant partners are China, Japan and Mexico. He wants to establish high taxes on imports from the Mexican countries in order to develop USA's internal economy. The same is planned to be done to China, as he considers they are taking profit from the USA due to the currency change. He is planning to leave the WTO and the TPP, as he wants to have bilateral agreements and not global ones, which he considers would foster the economy. If all of these things are taken into account, the USA will reach its highest deficit in history, due to the inflation it would bring to the country. Not only this, but the countries that are currently cooperating with the USA would react against him, leading to losses of huge amount of money, losing relations with other countries and affecting the global economy as a whole.